The stranger with grease on his hands. It was a warm Wednesday morning in a quiet town just outside Los Angeles. The sun had barely risen, casting long golden streaks across the nearly empty roads. The scent of gasoline and fresh coffee lingered in the air around the local gas station. People were beginning their days, some in a rush, some half awake, and others with nowhere in particular to go. A young woman named Ashley pulled into the station in her shiny silver SUV. She was in her late 20s, dressed in a sharp blue blazer, designer sunglasses perched on her head, and her phone glued to her ear. Her voice was loud, urgent, annoyed. She was arguing with someone, maybe her assistant, maybe a friend, about a meeting that had gone wrong. As she stepped out to pump gas, she noticed a man standing by the pump across from hers. He wore faded jeans, a dusty jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His hands were smudged with grease, and he was wiping them with a rag. To Ashley, he looked like someone who didn't belong, a drifter maybe. Someone who hadn't showered in days. She rolled her eyes, not caring if he noticed. Ugh, she muttered to herself. This place really lets anyone hang around. She wasn't trying to be cruel, not exactly. But she had spent the last few years working her way up in the fast-paced world of marketing, clawing for attention in meetings filled with powerful people. She had learned to judge quickly, to categorize people, to put them in boxes. And this man? He looked like someone who'd never made it. A nobody. He didn't respond to her mutterings. He kept his eyes on the car he was tending to, an old sedan with a dented hood and peeling paint. Ashley scoffed under her breath again and turned back to her phone. A moment later, her pump clicked, and she turned to hang it back. But then, she dropped her card. It slipped right under her car. She crouched to pick it up, her heel scraping awkwardly on the pavement. Just as she reached for it, the grease-stained man stepped forward and gently picked up the card. He held it out to her, without saying a word. Ashley snatched it back quickly, forcing a tight smile. "Thanks," she said, still not looking him in the eye. Her tone was clipped, dismissive. She grabbed a napkin from her center console and wiped the card down as if it had been soiled. That was when he finally spoke. "You know," he said in a quiet, even tone, "sometimes the people you look down on are just having a different kind of day." She looked at him, really looked for the first time, and in that moment something shifted, because he took off his cap. And it was him. Keanu Reeves. Ashley's mouth fell open. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stumbled backward slightly. She had seen him in movies. She had seen him on red carpets, in magazines, on posters. But here he was, standing at a gas station wearing worn clothes and holding a greasy rag. "Wait, are you—" she stammered. He gave a faint smile. "Yeah." "What? What are you doing here?" He shrugged casually. "Same thing you are, just filling up." Ashley was speechless, completely and utterly stunned. How could someone so famous, so kind-hearted, so iconic, be standing here like this? Why would he look like that, dress like that, move like he didn't care if anyone recognized him? She felt a flush rise to her cheeks, embarrassment, regret, confusion all swirled inside her. She had judged him, dismissed him. And now, standing in front of her, was one of the most respected men in Hollywood. Someone known not just for his acting, but for his humility and compassion. Keanu saw the struggle in her face. "Don't worry," he said gently. Most people wouldn't have noticed. She tried to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Keanu gave a small wave and turned back to his car. The sedan still looked beat up, but somehow it now carried a quiet dignity. Ashley watched him pull away slowly, the engine sputtering as he drove off into the early light. She stood there for a long while, her gas receipt fluttering in her hand, her thoughts spinning. Why had he been there? Why had he looked like that? And what had he meant when he said, "Just a different kind of day"? That night, Ashley couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. She Googled his name, read stories about him giving up his seat on trains, secretly, donating millions, helping strangers on the street, and yet, he never flaunted it. He just lived it. The next morning, Ashley returned to the same gas station. She spoke to the clerk inside, hoping to find out more. The clerk, a man in his 50s, with a warm smile, nodded knowingly. "Oh yeah," he said. "Keanu comes around sometimes, helps out, changes oil. Even fixed my cousin's flat tire once." Ashley blinked. "But why?" The clerk shrugged. "Maybe he likes being just another person. Or maybe he knows people like us could use a little kindness." She stepped out of the store with a strange tightness in her chest, the kind that comes when something small opens something big inside you. She didn't know it yet, but that moment at the gas station would be the beginning of a journey, one that would take her far beyond her designer world, one that would challenge her to see others with new eyes, and one that would show her that real power doesn't come from wealth or fame, but from the courage to be kind. And soon she would get another chance to cross paths with him. But next time, it wouldn't be by accident. The search for the man behind the mystery. Ashley sat at the edge of her bed, her legs curled beneath her, a steaming cup of chamomile tea cradled in her hands. The room was dim except for the gentle glow of a bedside lamp. Her phone screen lit up every few seconds with messages and emails, but she ignored them. Her mind was elsewhere, trapped in a loop she couldn't escape. Keanu Reeves. She said his name softly, like a secret. It sounded unreal. It wasn't just the shock of recognizing him at the gas station. It was the feeling he left behind, like a thread tied to her heart, pulling her toward something bigger than herself. He hadn't said much, but his words, his presence, and especially the humility in his actions kept echoing in her thoughts. The next morning, Ashley called in sick. She stared at the skyline from her apartment window and realized something had shifted inside her. For years, she had measured worth through results, through presentations, bonuses, followers, likes, and designer handbags. She didn't know how or why, but suddenly all of that felt hollow. She needed to know more about him, not the movie star, but the man who wiped grease from his hands and handed her a lost card without judgment. She began her search the only way she knew how. She opened her laptop and typed, "Keanu Reeves helping strangers." Hundreds of articles flooded her screen, stories of quiet generosity, candid photos of him carrying groceries for an elderly woman, videos of him waiting in line patiently like everyone else. He wasn't just a celebrity, he was something rarer, someone who remembered what it meant to be human. But what stuck with her most was a blog post from a mechanic named Rudy in Santa Clarita. It was dated a few months ago and read, "A man came into my shop wearing a cap and jeans, didn't say who he was, just helped me fix a tire while I dealt with a cranky customer. Later, he left $100 in my toolbox and a note that said, 'You're doing great work.'" Turns out it was Keanu Reeves. Ashley read it 3 times. Her heart pounded. Santa Clarita was just a couple of hours away. She shut the laptop, grabbed her car keys, and drove. The drive was long, winding through dry hills and forgotten exits. She passed rust-colored cliffs and cracked highways, her mind buzzing with nervous anticipation. What was she even doing? She had meetings to attend, calls to make, clients waiting. But none of that mattered. Something deeper was pulling her forward, a need to understand a man who had shattered every expectation she'd carried. When she arrived, the town looked ordinary. Quiet streets, small businesses, a taco truck parked beside a hardware store. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where people smiled without reason. Ashley found Rudy's shop near the end of a cul-de-sac, wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat. She parked and stepped out, adjusting her sunglasses. Inside, the air smelled of rubber and oil. The walls were lined with old tools and faded posters of classic cars. Rudy was a stocky man with calloused hands and a bandana wrapped around his head. He looked up from under the hood of a car and squinted at her. "You lost?" he asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. Ashley hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "No, I read your blog. About the man who helped you. I think I met him too." Rudy tilted his head. "You mean Keanu?" She nodded. He chuckled. "Yep, that was him. Showed up one morning like a ghost. Didn't say much, just jumped in like we were old friends." Ashley stepped closer. "Do you know why he was here? Does he come often?" Rudy scratched his beard. Not often, but I heard he sometimes visits. A little community center up in Palmdale. They do charity stuff. Repairs for low-income families, food drives. Quiet work, the kind nobody hears about. Ashley's chest tightened. It was strange how this man with access to everything the world could offer chose to spend his time here, hidden in dusty garages and community halls. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Rudy smiled. "You're not the first to go looking. For him, you know. But he doesn't want crowds. He just wants to help, like he's trying to balance the world in his own way." The drive to Palmdale took her another hour, the road stretching into golden plains and clusters of old farmland. Ashley wasn't sure what she was hoping to find, maybe just a glimpse, a sign, a chance to say she was sorry for how she judged him. She arrived at a modest building tucked between a school and a park. A hand-painted sign out front read, "Palmdale Community Collective." There were people outside, volunteers unloading crates of produce, handing out warm meals, fixing bikes. It was alive with kindness. Ashley stepped out of her car and scanned the crowd. And then she saw him, not center stage, not commanding attention, but at the side, crouched beside a little girl's broken scooter, grease on his hands, sleeves rolled up. Same dusty jacket. Keanu Reeves. Her breath caught in her throat. She walked slowly, almost afraid that if she blinked, he would disappear again. As she got closer, the little girl giggled and Keanu smiled gently, handing her a fixed wheel. He stood up and turned around. Their eyes met. This time Ashley didn't look away. "You again?" he said softly, recognizing her. Ashley smiled, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, me again." Keanu nodded. "You didn't have to come all this way." "I know," she replied, her eyes welling slightly. "But I wanted to." There was a long silence between them, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. "You were right," she added. "I looked down on you. I saw what I wanted to see. And I've been doing that to a lot of people lately." Keanu didn't respond right away. He looked around at the volunteers, at the families laughing and working together. "We all do," he said finally. "But what matters is what we choose to see next." Ashley looked at him, not as a movie star, not as a stranger, but as someone who understood what it meant to be broken and still choose to give. Her voice trembled when she asked, "Can I help too?" Keanu's smile deepened. "Absolutely." And with that, Ashley rolled up her sleeves, knelt down beside a boy struggling with his bicycle chain, and began her own act of repair. What started as a search for a man had turned into something more, a rediscovery of purpose, a reminder that the greatest change doesn't come from above, but from those who are willing to kneel beside the broken and lift them up. And as the sun began to set over Palmdale, Ashley realized she had just begun a journey that would not only reshape her life, but the lives of those around her. The weekend that changed everything by Sunday morning, the world felt quieter, the kind of quiet that comes not from stillness, but from peace, the kind that arrives when something inside you is settled into place after being lost for too long. Ashley stood in front of the community center's old mirror in the women's restroom, tying her hair back into a loose ponytail. There was no lipstick today, no makeup carefully blended with brushes, no perfume from the expensive glass bottle she used every morning before a pitch. Her blazer had been replaced by a simple gray t-shirt with the words, "We rise by lifting others," printed across the chest, faintly faded from dozens of washes. She hadn't even realized how light she felt until now, like the layers she'd worn for years had finally slipped away, leaving behind something honest. She stepped back into the main area, where the buzz of effort had already begun. Kids laughed outside as volunteers repainted the wooden fences around the center's garden. Inside, the kitchen steamed with giant pots of soup and rice. The air was thick with garlic and tomatoes with warmth and purpose. And there he was again, Keanu. He was standing near a table stacked with school supplies, helping an elderly woman fit hearing batteries into a small device. She was smiling, her eyes crinkled with gratitude. He wasn't speaking loudly or trying to draw attention. He was simply there, present in the moment, listening and giving. Ashley paused. Even now, after 2 days around him, something about his presence disarmed her. Not because he was famous, though that was still surreal, but because of the way he seemed to belong wherever he went. Even in a crowded room, he wasn't trying to lead or dominate. He served, and in doing so, he inspired. "You're early," Keanu said, noticing her as she approached. "Couldn't sleep," Ashley replied with a shy smile. "I've been thinking about all of this." "Good thinking or bad?" She hesitated. "Necessary." They both chuckled softly. "I thought I knew what mattered," she said, lowering her voice as they walked side by side toward the garden. "I thought success was about power being seen, winning arguments in boardrooms, but here, it's different. You've built something real." Keanu didn't respond immediately. He bent down, plucked a weed from the edge of a garden bed, and flicked it into a compost bucket. "This place isn't mine," he said. "I just show up sometimes. The real heroes are the ones who stay." Ashley knelt beside him, her fingers brushing against the soil. "But you're a part of it, whether you claim it or not. You make people feel like they matter." Keanu looked at her thoughtfully. "When I was younger," he said slowly, "I used to think fame would fix things, money, recognition. But the truth is, the higher you rise, the lonelier it gets, unless you keep your feet on the ground." She tilted her head. "You've lost people, haven't you?" He nodded. "A few." The air turned still for a moment. "I read about your sister," she said gently. "And your friend, River." Keanu's eyes didn't flinch, but they grew, darker, softer. "Pain has a way of introducing us to ourselves," he said. "You either close off or you open wider." Ashley looked down at her hands, streaked with dirt. "I think I've been closed off for a long time." Keanu reached into the soil and planted a new seedling. "But you showed up, that's something." By noon, the sun hung high and warm over the community garden. Kids formed a loose circle around Ashley and Keanu, their laughter like wind chimes in the breeze. They were playing a game, one Ashley hadn't played since childhood. Duck, duck, goose. And for the first time in years, she was laughing without needing a reason. After the game, one of the children, a small boy with oversized glasses and untied shoes, tugged on Ashley's shirt. "Miss Ashley," he said, "are you coming? Tomorrow too?" She knelt to his level. "I'll try." He grinned. "You're nice. I like when you're here." Her heart tightened in the best way. "I like being here too," she said. Later that afternoon, while the others prepared to close up for the day, Ashley and Keanu sat on the back steps of the center, sipping lemonade from paper cups. "You know," she said, "I used to think I was important, like really important." Keanu smiled. "And now? Now I think I was just loud." He laughed, a full sound that surprised even her. "It's easy to confuse noise for impact," he said. "But real change? It's quiet. It's helping a single person. It's listening instead of talking. It's showing up again even when nobody thanks you." Ashley nodded slowly. "You're like the opposite of every powerful man I've met in Los Angeles." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that good or bad?" "Definitely good." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the nearby trees. Ashley looked out at the street where cars passed and families walked hand in hand. The world felt different today, not because it had changed, but because she had. "Can I ask you something?" she said, turning to him. "Sure. How do you stay so grounded? After everything, after all the fame, the tragedy, the attention, how do you still care?" Keanu stared ahead, thoughtful. "Because I've seen what happens when you stop caring, and I never want to be that person." Ashley said nothing, but she understood, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone in her thoughts. As evening came and the last boxes were stacked, Ashley offered to stay behind and help lock up. Keanu handed her a ring of keys. "You trust me with these?" she teased. "You've earned it," he replied. And something in those words, a simple acknowledgement, a quiet trust, filled her with more confidence than any title ever had. Before they left, Ashley stood alone in the hallway looking at the photos pinned to the community board. Smiling faces, repaired homes, volunteers painting murals, planting trees, hugging strangers who became friends. In the center of it all was a candid picture of Keanu, laughing beside an elderly man holding a cane. Ashley touched the edge of the photo lightly, her eyes misty. This place had changed her. He had changed her. But something told her this was only the beginning. And as she walked into the fading sunset with Keanu by her side, Ashley knew something else for sure. The woman who had judged a stranger at a gas station had finally been humbled by the kindness of the man she almost ignored. And the next chapter of her life would be written not in boardrooms or on glossy magazine covers, but in quiet moments, shared stories, and acts of simple, powerful humanity. Beneath the lights of the forgotten town, days turned into a week, and Ashley's life began to unfold in unfamiliar, beautiful ways. She still checked her emails, still received notifications from her agency, and still got invited to rooftop events and networking brunches. But for the first time, those pings and pings didn't control her. She started letting them go unanswered. The loud, fast world she once worshipped had been replaced with something softer, slower, and far more meaningful. Every morning she drove back to the Palmdale Community Center. It was a routine now, grabbing coffee from the corner cart where the barista already knew her name, walking past the mural of children painted on the outer wall, and greeting people with warm hugs and real smiles. But the one thing that never faded was her growing friendship with Keanu. They didn't talk about movies. Not once. Not about the red carpets, the interviews, or the millions who knew his face. In fact, around here he wasn't Keanu Reeves, he was just Keanu. The guy who brought donuts on Saturdays, who helped fix roofs on old trailers, and who remembered the names of every child who had passed through that community hall. One afternoon, while they were cleaning up after a literacy event, Ashley found herself alone with him again. They were stacking chairs, moving tables, and tossing crumpled flyers into a recycling bin. Sweat glistened on her forehead and her back ached slightly, but she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. Keanu glanced at her. "Miss what?" "The old life, the fame, the premieres, all that. Attention." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a fallen crayon from under the table and placed it carefully into a box of supplies. "I don't miss the noise," he said. "But I miss the art sometimes, the stories, not the spotlight. Just the part where you reach people through something honest." Ashley nodded slowly. "I used to write," she admitted. "Before I got caught up in clients and campaigns, I wrote poetry, little scenes. Once I even started a novel." Keanu raised his eyebrows. "What happened?" "Someone told me it wouldn't sell, so I stopped." He looked at her. Truly looked. "Maybe it wasn't supposed to sell. Maybe it was just supposed to save you." Her throat tightened at those words. She had spent so many years defining herself by what others thought, what others praised. And in doing so, she had silenced the most truthful parts of herself. "Do you think it's too late?" she whispered. Keanu shook his head gently. "It's never too late to begin again. The page is always blank tomorrow." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the fading hum of the center. Then he said something that surprised her. "Come with me this weekend. There's someone I want you to meet." The following Saturday, Ashley found herself riding in the passenger seat of Keanu's pickup truck. It was old, with a dent in the passenger door and a radio that only played static or classic rock. The air smelled faintly of pine and dust, and the road they were on twisted through hills and past silent farms. She didn't ask where they were going. She trusted him now. After nearly 2 hours of driving, they arrived at a small, sleepy town nestled between golden fields. Time seemed to move differently here. The buildings were faded, the streets nearly empty, and yet there was something comforting about the stillness. Keanu parked beside a humble one-story building with chipped paint and a faded wooden sign that read, "Sunset Home." "What is this place?" Ashley asked, stepping out. "It's a shelter for seniors," Keanu replied. Some of them were abandoned by family, some are just forgotten. Ashley's heart ached instantly. And you come here? As often as I can, he said. They don't care about who I am, they just want someone to talk to. They stepped inside, and immediately, a warm, homely smell filled the air. Lavender, baked bread, old wood. The lights were soft, the windows open to let in sunlight. People sat in rocking chairs reading, knitting, or just staring out at the horizon. An older woman with silver hair and deep smile lines lit up when she saw Keanu. "You came back," she cried, reaching for his hand. He knelt beside her and squeezed her fingers. "Of course I did, Elena. I brought a friend this time." Ashley introduced herself, humbled beyond words. For the next few hours, she sat beside people who told stories of decades past, of love lost and found, of war, of travel, of regret, of hope. And Keanu moved through the rooms like a thread of light, listening with reverence, laughing gently, holding hands without hesitation. Ashley watched him speak with a man named Joseph, who had once been a photographer but lost his vision 10 years ago. Now he just talked about the pictures he could still see in his mind. Keanu listened like every word mattered. Ashley felt her heart stretch in ways it never had. She had chased prestige for so long, only to discover real beauty in a place most people ignored. And in this forgotten town, beneath these flickering lights, she found something so deeply human that it brought tears to her eyes. Before they left, Elena grabbed her hand and said, "Whatever it is you're looking for, darling, it's not in the noise, it's in the quiet. Don't forget that." On the drive back, Ashley was silent. Not because she had nothing to say, but because her heart was too full for words. That night, back in her apartment, Ashley sat on the floor with an old notebook in her lap. She hadn't opened it in years. The pages were yellowed slightly, the corners bent. But the words inside still whispered to her, like an old friend patiently waiting. She began to write. Not to impress, not to publish, not for anyone but herself. And, for the first time in a very long time, she felt whole. Because sometimes a stranger at a gas station isn't just a stranger. Sometimes he's a mirror, a guide, a spark that lights a path you forgot you were meant to follow. What we leave behind. Ashley stared at the blinking cursor on her screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, heart pulsing with something unfamiliar. Hope. It had been over a week since she'd written those first few pages in her old notebook. And now, here she was again, sitting at her desk by the window. This time, though, she wasn't writing for approval or applause. She was writing to tell the truth, to make sense of everything she had seen, heard, and felt in the quiet corners of Palmdale and that forgotten town with the shelter. Her story didn't begin with the girl in the blazer or the polished meetings. It began at the gas station, when she looked into the eyes of a man she had dismissed, and realized how wrong she had been. Outside her window, the city was the same. But Ashley wasn't. She had started volunteering 3 days a week at the community center, not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. She tutored kids after school, helped run weekend food drives, and brought her marketing skills to create better outreach campaigns for the center's needs. She hadn't quit her job yet, but something in her had already left that world behind. Her heart just hadn't sent the resignation email yet. On Thursday, something happened that shook her even more. She was helping unload supplies from a truck when a man in a charcoal suit and shiny shoes stepped onto the sidewalk with a confused expression. He was clean-cut, about her age, and clearly not used to this part of town. "Ashley Mendoza?" he asked, glancing at a clipboard. She wiped her forehead and nodded. "Yeah. Can I help you?" He extended a hand. "I'm with Taylor and Associates. One of our executives saw the campaign you created for the literacy drive. He didn't know you'd left the firm. He wants to talk to you about a creative director position." Ashley blinked, hard. "I didn't submit anything," she said. "No," the man replied. "But someone named KeanuReeves sent it on your behalf, with a note that said, 'This is the kind of leadership your company needs.'" Her stomach dropped. "Keanu?" Her hands trembled slightly as she shook the man's hand. He gave her a card, smiled politely, and left. She stood in place for a long while, stunned. It wasn't the job offer that moved her. It was the belief behind it. The fact that Keanu had seen something in her. Not because of status or history, but because of who she had become when she let go of the roles she used to perform. That night, she didn't call him. Instead, she drove to the community center even though it was already dark. And sure enough, there he was, sitting on the back porch, sipping coffee from a thermos, a blanket draped over his shoulders like an old friend. "You sent my campaign," she said quietly, approaching him. He looked at her and nodded, unsurprised. "You didn't have to do that," she added. "I know," he said. "But you needed someone to remind you what you're capable of." Ashley sat down beside him, the night air cool on her cheeks. "You really believe I can change something?" she asked. Keanu turned to her. "I already watched you change this place, and yourself." She let the words soak in like rain on dry earth. She hadn't realized how much she needed them, not just to hear that she was doing well, but to believe that what she was becoming mattered. "You ever think about legacy?" she asked. Keanu leaned back, eyes on the stars. "Every day." "What do you think yours will be?" He smiled. "Hopefully, not my movies. I hope people remember how I made them feel. I hope someone out there tells a story about the guy who showed up when they needed help most." Ashley looked at him for a long moment. "I think you're already that story." He didn't reply, but he didn't need to. A few days later, Ashley returned to the senior shelter on her own. She brought a trunk full of donated books, blankets, and fresh fruit. Elena remembered her immediately and hugged her like family, but one man was missing. Joseph, the blind photographer, wasn't there. "He passed away," Elena whispered with a trembling lip. "Peacefully. 2 nights ago." Ashley's breath caught. "He asked for you," Elena added. "He said he wanted you to keep telling stories, even if no one else listened." Ashley sat down in the very chair where Joseph used to rock slowly and describe the photographs only he could still see. Tears rolled silently down her face. She hadn't known him long, but he had left, a mark so deep it would never fade. When she got home, she wrote a story just for him. She called it Pictures in the Dark. It was about a man who had lost his sight but never stopped seeing beauty. She shared it with the community center. The kids drew illustrations for it, and eventually, it became a small printed book on the center's shelf. One child even asked, "Is Joseph a superhero?" Ashley smiled. He was. The days continued. Ashley found herself slowly fading from her old world and blending deeper into this new one. But something inside her kept growing louder, the urge to speak, to write, to share. And so she started. A blog, not to promote herself, not to sell products or pitch brands, but to tell the stories of the people no one saw. The janitor who donated half his salary to the shelter, the single mom who taught night school and fed 6 kids, the shy boy who fixed old radios and gifted them to the elderly. And in every story there was a hidden thread: kindness. At the very end of each blog post, she signed it simply, "Written with gratitude, a girl who once met a nobody." She never revealed it was Keanu, because she knew he wouldn't want the spotlight. But she also knew that people would see themselves in her story, both the ones who had been ignored and the ones who had done the ignoring. Her blog began to spread. One by one, strangers wrote to her saying they cried, they remembered, they reached out to someone they had forgotten. People began sharing their own acts of kindness. A chain reaction of humanity, set in motion by a moment at a gas station. And through it all, Keanu remained beside her, sometimes literally, sometimes as a quiet echo in her memory, reminding her that one simple act of seeing someone, truly seeing them, could change a life forever. What we leave behind, she realized, isn't measured in fame or fortune. It's measured in the warmth we give, the people we lift, and the lives we touch when no one is watching, and that would be her legacy too. The echo of a stranger's kindness, autumn came quietly that year. The trees lining Ashley's apartment building turned a soft orange. their leaves spinning like memories in the wind. The air grew colder, and the mornings stretched longer, filled with stillness and thought. Ashley sat by the window, laptop open, a half-drunk mug of coffee beside her. Her blog was now being read in over a dozen countries, not because she promoted it, but because people shared it. Strangers from everywhere had started writing in, sending photos of themselves helping elderly neighbors, organizing food drives, forgiving old friends, or simply sitting and listening to someone lonely. People who once rushed past the world were now stopping, noticing, reaching out. It was a ripple effect, and at the center of it all was the one moment, the one mistake she had made at a gas station, thinking the man in the grease-stained jacket was a nobody. It had changed everything. Keanu never asked for recognition. In fact, he rarely even brought up the blog. But he always smiled when Ashley shared stories with him. They met less frequently now. Not because anything had broken between them, but because both were following their own paths. Hers had become rooted in storytelling and service. His remained in silence and small gestures, the kind of presence that didn't need noise to make an impact. But today something was different. Today marked exactly 1 year since the moment that started it all. Ashley returned to that same gas station. The place hadn't changed. Same pumps, same little convenience store, same blinking sign half-lit above the entrance. She stood by pump 6 where it had happened, where she had muttered under her breath, where her card had slipped beneath the car, and where a quiet man had handed it back with no judgment, only wisdom. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of the spot, not for the blog but for herself, a reminder of humility, of how easily we misjudge what we don't take time to understand. She stood there for a while, just breathing, and then a voice behind her. "Figured I might find you here." She turned. Keanu. He wore the same jacket, a little more worn, a coffee in one hand and a plastic bag with 2 sandwiches in the other. "You remember the day?" she asked, smiling. He nodded. Some moments stick. They sat together on the curb near the station, sharing the sandwiches in silence, watching cars pull in and out. "I came here today to say thank you," Ashley said quietly, looking at him. "Not just for that day, for everything after." He took a bite, chewed slowly, then said, "You don't owe me anything." "But I do," she insisted. "You saw something in me when I didn't even see it myself." Keanu looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted lazily. "You know," he said after a moment, "I used to wonder if anything I did really mattered. I'd walk through airports and hear people scream my name, but I still went home to an empty apartment. It took me years to realize. The loudest applause means nothing if you don't like who you are when you're alone." Ashley's eyes softened. "You like who you are now?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I'm getting there." She looked down at her hands. "Me too." A few weeks later, the community center held a fall festival. Bonfires, music, face painting, caramel, apples. The parking lot was transformed with twinkle lights and booths built from wood pallets and donated tarps. Ashley was asked to speak. She stood on a small stage, microphone trembling slightly in her hand. A crowd had gathered. Kids, parents, volunteers, strangers, even a few familiar faces from the senior shelter. And somewhere in the back, leaning against a post with quiet eyes and a calm smile, was Keanu. "1 year ago," Ashley began, "I made a mistake. A small one maybe, but it changed my life. I judged someone too quickly. I labeled a man because of what he wore, how he looked, and what I assumed he couldn't be." She paused, scanning the crowd. "I called him a nobody." A hush fell over the space, even the children went quiet. But the truth is, he was everything I wasn't. Kind when I was impatient, gentle when I was dismissive, and more human than I'd allowed myself to be in a long, long time. Ashley took a breath. That moment became my turning point. Not because I was corrected, but because I was shown grace. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she let it fall. So today, if you take anything from this festival, from this year, from this journey, let it be this. The people we dismiss the fastest are often the ones we need the most. The ones who remind us who we are and who we still have the chance to become. The crowd erupted in applause. Not a wild celebrity kind of applause, but the kind that meant people were moved, changed, awakened. Keanu watched from the back, eyes shining, but he didn't step forward. He didn't need the spotlight. Ashley found him later standing by the mural of handprints the kids had painted that summer. "I meant every word," she said. He looked at the mural. "I know. You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "I think today, I really do like who I am." She smiled and took his hand, not as a gesture of romance or ceremony, but as a connection. Two people who had crossed paths at the exact right moment. "So what now?" she asked. Keanu looked around. At the joy, at the lights, at the world quietly becoming better. One human choice at a time. "Now," he said softly, "we keep showing up." And so they did. Ashley kept writing, kept showing up, kept telling. Stories not for fame, but for healing. She published her first book based on her blog. It was called The Nobody Who Saved Me. She donated every cent to build another community center in a neighboring town. And Keanu, he remained the same. He still changed oil, fixed bicycles, sat with the grieving, laughed with the lonely, and held the hands of the forgotten. He still never needed the credit. But those who met him never forgot. And somewhere, out in the world, another girl dropped her card at a gas station, and a quiet man in a dusty jacket picked it up and smiled.